All right. Can everyone hear me?
I
Yes.
can hear you.
Yep.
All right. It is
Yeah.
6:30 p.m. And so we are going to call the meeting to order. Please mute your microphone unless you are speaking. Any guests in attendance should introduce themselves in the chat, listing their organizational affiliation, if any, and providing their contact information. To ensure that we have adequate time to hear from all commissioners, guests are asked not to speak during ACP meetings, apart from the invited speakers, though all are welcome to add their thoughts and comments to the chat. Let's begin with approving the draft of the minutes from the last meeting. Do we have any questions or concerns, or can we pass the minutes from the May meeting by common consent? All right, so moved. We will first hear tonight from the Compliance Subcommittee regarding the status report to the commission and proposal for two new subcommittees. And so that subcommittee now has the floor.
Hi,
Hi.
wonderful to be here with everyone tonight. I'm here to share some updates from the compliance subcommittee. Over the past few weeks, the subcommittee, excuse me, the subcommittee has met 3 times to review the recommendations put forth in the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force report. There were 87 recommendations, so this is a painstaking process. We reviewed these recommendations and their implementations as noted on the dashboard, the Reimagining Public Safety dashboard, and we developed questions for the county and relevant agencies regarding these implementations. We're also working on an additional document to put forth our recommendations surrounding how these recommendations have been implemented, sort of a recommendation on a recommendation. So sort of questions where we need more clarification, as a lot of the information provided was incomplete, as well as feedback. Excuse me. We're hoping to go through this process again for the Effective Law Enforcement for All report. And then we'll need to figure out what we're going to do about some of the other documents that are outlined in section 2 of our work plan, as those are not as easily accessible in terms of status updates on those documents. But at the very least, for the Effective Law Enforcement for All report, we're hoping to carry out the same process. We're open to feedback on what folks think the format of a recommendations document should be on the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. I'm happy to put our existing questions into the chat, although those are still under development. We should have those fully finished by this week. And then we're also putting forth the idea of forming 2 new subcommittees to sort of follow up on various major subject areas that these recommendations tackled throughout the year. Francisco, do you want to elaborate on what those subcommittees would be?
I'm sorry, before you go any further, Francisco, Eva, will you please we understand that it's a draft or a work in progress, but will you put the questions that you have in the chat that might
Absolutely.
help us, in giving feedback? And I'm also wondering, is that something, would that violate the Meetings Act if you emailed them? I don't think so. But that way offline we would have access to them to send back some feedback.
We can go ahead and distribute that as long as there's no discussion between the committee members on feedback.
All right,
Great.
very good.
I'll put the link for that in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, Francisco.
Yeah. So there were 2 areas that are both in our work plan, draft work plan, that we haven't really focused on yet, and that need follow-up in the reimagining policing task force. And those are the acquisition, management, use, and distribution of transparency of MCPD data. And the other one is school safety. And we thought that we actually touched upon school safety at our previous meeting, and there seemed to be a consensus that we needed, not only do we needed to keep it in the work plan, but that there should be a subcommittee formed to follow up on that part of the work plan. And I think if I recall correctly, Brian, John, and Ava mentioned interest in serving in that committee. The data element is a little bit more complex. You know, I think a subcommittee should be formed on that. I'm willing to work in that subcommittee. Just to take a look at the issues. These were issues that were worked on by the ACP before we came on board, and they were working on it. And also, you may recall that when we asked the county council for their priorities and what we should be working on, they mentioned that they're still interested in this particular issue of data. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Teresa Walsh.
Please just call me Terry.
I was
just
picky.
I just want to ask, and thanks Ava for this. This is great. And well, Francisco, how does this integrate with the work plan in terms of strategies? Is this basically number one?
This would be number 2. Right?
But
There's
talk about gathering data, right?
Right. And number 2, and that's data, and number 9, which is school safety.
So it would help me if somehow there could be an antidote or whatever at the end that says, if we're going to use the work plan, if we have the subcommittees working on 2 and 3, that at the end you put a paragraph, just the soft brackets, and say 2,3 or something like that. So then we can cross-reference to know where we're going, because there's a lot of strategies, and I want to make sure that we're being, you know, appropriately mindful of where we put our eggs in which basket when we go after these things, because some of them may be like a Venn diagram, some may overlap, right? So that's just an ask, because I was trying to figure out, okay, how to manage that, and especially, you know, we're a finite group, you know, so there's a fair amount of subcommittees that will need to be had.
Okay.
I'm not really sure what you have in mind. I'm amenable to it. So
at the end of the work plan, or at the end of the work, so at the end of the work plan, you have strategies, and I know I'm going ahead a bit, Brian, or Pastor, but strategies is so there's strategy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there's 9 of them. So maybe have a cross-reference of what subcommittee is going to be working on that.
Okay.
If you want to label subcommittee A, B, C, that way we don't get messed up with numbers, something like that.
Sure. I mean, right now, what we for number 2, we're calling it the compliance subcommittee. You know, we can certainly, and we can talk later about this. But yeah, so, and just to be clear, the strategies would be number 1 is, no, excuse me, not number 1.
Do you want to pull it up, Francisco?
No, I have it in front of me. There are, and we will discuss it later in the meeting, is strategy number 5, which is review MCPD's data collection, analysis, reporting, and management practices to ensure that they meet internal police policy and legislative requirements. And so that's one. And the other one would be number 9, school safety.
Okay. All right, so how do we want to proceed? Do we want to identify subcommittees for data and for school safety now?
So I think that is a good thing to do. I think before we even do that, I guess if any folks on the commission have feedback on what it is we're doing as the compliance subcommittee right now, and if folks want to give the go ahead to us to keep working through these other documents, that's probably good to have
Mm-hmm.
agreement on that as well. Do folks have feedback?
I don't.
Right.
I just frankly, I think you know, we've had 4 people working on this subcommittee: Ava, myself, Arthur, and John. And I you know, it's really interesting that we're finally, I think, through the 3 working sessions, we've managed to really get a very good document. It's not finalized, but it's in very good shape. And that's the questions that we collectively, follow-up questions that we have for the different agencies that received these recommendations and provided some feedback on their implementation. I you know, if I may, I would raise the motion that offer the motion that we endorse the work of the subcommittee and look forward to both the finalized set of questions that we should send through staff to the various agencies, and also that we continue working on the other reports, and that, you know, we continue briefing the commission on our work.
I don't think I'm allowed to second that.
I'll make a motion that we second that. I'll second the motion.
Okay, very good. So it's been moved and seconded that we endorse or support the continuing work of the compliance subcommittee. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, the motion passes. So that being the case, so if compliance is the subcommittee, and so we're looking at all these areas of compliance, or are these subcommittees?
Well, they can have folks on them who were not on the compliance subcommittee. I mean, that I think was the goal, is to have folks
Right.
tracking schools and data throughout
Right.
the course of the year, regardless of whether they were on the compliance subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we've identified these 2, but there were several other areas of compliance. And so what of those other areas, or are these 2 just are these our priorities?
I think these are just the biggest.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because there's only so much work we can do, but we do want to be as effective as possible, right?
Yeah.
Before we move, so let's identify these subcommittees. But Francisco, you got my curiosity peak. Off the rip, do we know that there are issues, compliance issues, in data management? We know that was identified as a priority, right?
Right.
But you kind of intimated that there's some things that we need to.
Well, you know, this has been a challenge for both for the community in a sense of trying to see the data that MCPD collects, and trying to figure out, you know, whether the data shows problems or not. And MCPD has replied that they have requested a new database management system. They've requested additional resources, and we don't know where they are on that yet. I think also that the data subcommittee should look at other broader issues. In other words, what is the data that we really want to see? That is because what is the data that to us addresses the issues of the community, and how should it be presented? You know, the MCPD crime report, it includes a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with crime data. And you know, so I think those are things that need to be discussed, that need to be looked at a little bit more carefully, and see where they get us. In terms of, as you mentioned, potential subcommittees or additional areas of concern, you know, I don't think we're there yet, but sure enough, maybe through this process, when we report back to the commission, we may decide that there's a new area that we need to focus on.
Okay,
Francisco,
thank you.
I have a question, Francisco.
Mhm.
In my background working with Office of Inspector General, sometimes when we went to the agency, we asked them to produce for us their system of records. In other words, it's all their databases of all the systems that they have records and data on, and with just basically a synopsis of what that database consists of. So this way we know that nothing's being withheld, and that if we request something, we know what database that we are seeking.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that may be something to look into. You know, the members of this commission, by and large, and maybe with you accepting, we're not experts at looking, you know, at parsing through data. But maybe that's one way to look at it. The other thing that we can do also is be part of the conversation with MCPD as they are developed, as they get their new resources, and we can help them highlight the specific data sets that we would like to see, and that the community would like to see. But you know, again, I think that's part of the work for the subcommittee.
Right. Okay.
That's good.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks for calling me, Terry. I had to unmute. So some of this, I do think there needs to be a crosswalk between this and the workforce strategies. Because I look at like number 5, review data collection. Like, so I think there's some threads that go in between, almost like a spider web, right? Everything's kind of connected a bit. So I don't know, and what our objectives are. So the objectives with the strategic plan and how that aligns with this. I just briefly pulled up what you sent, Eva, thank you. But, you know, there were questions, but then there also is data that we want to make sure that say, okay, we reach this objective with our strategic priority. Our strategic priority is this, and this work group worked on it, and this is what the outcome is, and this is a check mark, something like that. I'm just putting in there because I do think this data and compliance, which could be a quality word, interweaves with many of the things that are in the strategic priorities for the work plan.
Sure, and you know, this is a fairly small commission, and I think that that's going to help. I think also we will have some of the members of some of the commissioners serving in multiple subcommittees. And as you can see that at this stage, the strategy on data is fairly broad. And I think it should remain like that, because as we work through the issues in the subcommittee, I think then we will decide, we will be able to see what are areas of concern, and decide, to follow up on those. But yeah, the compliance subcommittee will provide a certain amount of data that would feed, as we get answers from the agencies. This data would help very much feed into the work of the subcommittees and address the strategies and support the strategies that we're pursuing in the work plan.
Okay, thanks. Sunny?
Yeah, I do. I want to follow up on the point that Henry raised. What kind of authority, let's say if you request a certain data element or a system of record, does the subcommittee have that kind of authority to request it? And will they have to provide once we request it if the data is available?
I would assume any data that's available to the general public, we could access. It's just that the general public seldom makes those requests. And
Right.
so we yeah.
Yeah, but there may be data that may be stored in the system of record, like Henry was pointing out, but may not be available for the public consumption. It's not displayed publicly. Can we request those kind of data? Because that's probably where the information that we are looking for may lie, right? I can tell you one example, because in my local area, we track the closure rates. It is not public how many crimes are open for how many crimes are closed. That is not available as in the public report, right? That is a request that we need to make explicitly to the precinct for display in our local websites, right? So,
we do have the ability and the right to ask questions. There are some questions that may not be answered, some information that may not be provided, but if you don't ask, you don't know. And I think from our perspective, our goal, our mission is to provide advice to the commission, to the county council. And so what we want to be able to help the county, the council is, what data sets, what are the problems that we see, or what are the areas of concern that we see, and also what are we suggesting that they follow up on, and so that's where we can contribute.
Okay, anyone else? So shall we start with forming the data subcommittee first? Are there any takers? And there's enough at this point, everybody should be on the subcommittee. And so maybe we should start by asking who's not on the subcommittee. Sunny, are you interested?
Yeah,
so,
I'll together take it.
So Sunny, I want to volunteer you to be the point person also. So will you contact the others in the group to organize your initial conversations, please?
Will do. So who is there in the other subcommittee?
Is there anyone else who will serve on the data subcommittee? All right, that's excellent. So you have C. Arthur Blair, you have Francisco, you have Henry.
Got it.
So how many committees do we need on? That's what I was going to say. I'll raise my hand, but there may be another committee coming, right?
So it looks like we're forming 2 tonight at the recommendation of the compliance subcommittee. Is that right?
Right.
Right. All right. So we have 4. I think Sean Watson. Sean, did you just also volunteer for the data committee? Is that in the chat?
I did.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks a lot. So we have 5 for the data committee. So Sunny, you have C. Arthur, you have Francisco, you have Henry, you have Sean. Who's the 4th person, 5th person? Or Sunny, you the 5th person?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm the 5th person.
Very good. So will you by email then please reach out to that group to begin those conversations?
Will do.
And we thank Eva and Francisco for also being a resource. If you need to follow up with them. All right. So
and
then
Arthur and John.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And thank you so much also. Yes. All right. School Safety is the second. And I think we had a group to kind of jump on board last time. It's like fish jumping in the boat, right? That happens once in a lifetime. All right. So Sean says he will assist on that also.
Terry.
Terry, you can throw me in there as well. I think there was another from the last time, right?
It was me. I'm happy to serve as a resource and I can serve on the committee. I won't take point on that committee, but I'm happy to be involved. I
Understand.
can't take point if people need me to. But I would prefer that someone else.
Right. And that's fair. Thank you. All right. So is anyone not on a committee at this point? Christina and Kathy, are you the two of you on a committee? Cherie?
This is Cherie. I don't think I'm on a committee.
All right. Do you want to join
I
us
think
on
I
school
was, but I
safety?
think we finished.
Oh,
Say again?
you were on a past committee. That is true. So
Right.
all
So
right.
so yeah, I think my answer is I'm not on the committee.
Okay. All right.
So just let me know. I don't really want to do data because I'm not that. Yeah, no.
Well, that is fine. As we keep going, as was shared earlier, there may be other things to come up where we'll need to form a subcommittee. So I think we're good with what we have for this evening. Terry, can I volunteer you to please be the point person for the school safety subcommittee? So you wrangle all of us to have our initial conversations via email. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Excellent. Thank you again, everyone. Let's keep it rolling. So now we're shifting to the draft of our annual report, which everyone should have received by email. Francisco, do you want us to share it? Should we?
Yeah, whatever is best. It's 13 pages long. And I just, if anybody, hopefully everybody has read it. As Terry pointed out, my editor pointed out, it's mostly drawn, or it draws heavily from the minutes of our meetings.
Right.
So, ideally there should not be much of a controversy there. But if there are any questions or any changes that anyone would suggest, this is, it's a good time to talk about it. Yeah.
Right. So I saw your several emails asking for input. I went through it this weekend, and silence for me is an affirmation, but to the others, does anyone have any feedback on the work plan?
No, on the report.
Excuse me, on the annual report. My bad. I'm getting ahead in the agenda. All right, so I think we can prepare to push it forward if there are no.
Right, good. Then the only thing that's there are two things, and I forgot to mention, there are two things that need to be attached. Well, three things: the two letters that we sent to the county council, and if today we finish with the work plan, then we'll just attach the revised work plan.
All right. So that it's official, will someone offer a motion that we move forward with the draft that we have received of the annual report with the additional items that Frank just identified, so that you don't have to say all that again? You can simply say so moved.
So moved.
All right, so we have so moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we move forward with the work plan in the draft form that we have received with the additional items that Francisco just identified. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, everyone, unmute your mics and give Francisco a hand for his hard work.
Great
And
job,
Terry.
Francisco. Great job.
Oh, and Terry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisco. Wonderful
and
job.
Terry.
Thank you.
And Terry.
Awesome. I'm used to working with teams at the church, so I don't know how to send a heart, but I'm sending you a heart, Francisco. Okay.
And I'm sorry, Chair Bellamy, just to confirm, that was a vote to approve and publish the work plan with the additions that you mentioned.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right. Okay, so we're a little ahead of schedule. We're going now to the work plan. This we probably should pull up for sure, right?
Yeah, and
So Logan, just to correct, I think what you said was work plan and that was for the annual
Thank you.
report.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, that's
Yeah,
the
thanks.
report.
All
No
right.
problem.
So I'm unable to share a document. Logan, are you able to share?
Yeah, let me go ahead and make you a co-host, Chair Bellamy, and now go ahead. If you try, you should be able to share.
All right. Let me just pull up the document again. All right. Okay, I can share. That's very kind of you. Okay. All right. So we've all received a copy of the work plan. Are there any questions or thoughts?
if I may,
Please.
and to help sort of focus this conversation a little bit, you know, we discussed this briefly last time, and it seemed that we had a consensus on the, you know, the introduction and the goal and objective. And what we need to now discuss more carefully is the strategies. So in the strategies, we agreed that we agreed on to keep 4 of the strategies. One, well, actually more. 1, 4, 6, 9, and 10. And we needed to discuss more whether we wanted to follow strategies 3, 5, 7, and 8. And so if I what I would like is to see if anyone has any second thoughts about the preamble, the introduction, the goal, and the objectives. And if we don't, then we can move on to the strategies.
I'm fine with it. Is everyone fine? Can we move on to strategies? Are there any concerns with the preamble, the goals, and objectives?
I have a question. Would there need to be verbiage about our connection to the community as well in this? Or is that something that they know we do?
Well, so,
It's just a question. That's all I'm just asking.
Sure.
If that can be.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think you're right, John, like somehow interlaced to the goal, right?
Okay.
And with that, again, the goal is to reach here and the objective is how are we going to do that, right? And measurable, right? The objectives have to be measurable. Like, so we're gonna have X meetings with the public or whatever.
Right. Well, that's
in the
in the
strategies.
strategy. Yeah.
Right,
that's
right.
in the
But yeah, so the strategies are really subsets of the objectives.
right. Yeah.
Okay, I can see that. I can see that where that's in the strategy. I just didn't know if it was something that would need to be in the introductory
But
or even the objective.
I think it should be somewhere up here.
right.
Because in your preamble is kind of it's like a mini thesis, right? So there needs to be a statement saying that we are representing the community. It looks like it reads as if we are a tool of the council, which we are, for lack of a better term, but we also have responsibility to the communities we represent.
Right. And so it's implied in the first paragraph, the Advisory Commission on Policing was created in response to the public dialogue around police practices and to increase community involvement in matters of public safety. So that's what we are doing. So it was in response to what the public dialogue then, but also the county council wanted to increase community involvement in matters of public safety. So I think it's already there, but does that make sense?
Yes, I can see it. I can see it. Arthur has his hand up.
Okay.
Arthur, you're muted.
On this issue of why we were created, I was under the impression to some extent that we were sort of a bridge between the council people and the police department, and to give our feedback and assessment how we were going to serve the interests of the best interests of the public. So I think we have to note that we're serving two needs here, you know, and a bridge. We're sort of like in the middle to sort of advocate the best on both sides and present it that this is the best way to serve the community, the best way to serve, whether the two is doing the best they can to serve the community. So I think we need to kind of push that in, that we're here to do that.
Okay.
It's good. We have to evaluate, make an analysis, and to present something. Mostly we have to present to a large extent after the assessment to the council how they can legislate, execute, make policies, and that benefits the public.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that, you know, our goal is, you know, to help the county council come up with solutions that deliver fair, effective, and equitable policing service to Montgomery County residents, and ensure that the evolving needs, expectations, and values of the communities, diverse communities are, of the county's diverse communities are addressed. Does that address what?
I can go with, personally, I can go with that.
Okay.
I'll say this, Francisco. I think the verb, like where it says advising the county council, maybe there's a verb to put in there with the community, so we're actively engaged with the community as well.
Okay. So, okay, so you okay.
Can I also ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
How much of this is ours to change, or does this verbiage come from the county council? Did the county council set the goals for what they expected? This is all completely ours?
Oh, we can massage the language, absolutely.
All right, because I know we have this section here that seems to be bullet points from.
Right, and that is drawn from the legislation, but
right.
But certainly the goal, it's something we can change. And so what I'm hearing is that we do need something in the goal to go beyond advising the county council. Is that what I'm saying?
I guess my suggestion would be, yeah, I think I'm alluding to that, where it's like we're not just working for the council, but we're also working with our community, working for the community as well. So I'm not an English major, so
okay.
But I'll leave that to Eva. She can help with the verb. I'm not just thinking of the bus, Eva.
Okay, Here's,
I'm looking for some verbiage. I guess so if somebody else was to read it, they would see that we're also, as Arthur said, bridge with the community and the county council.
sure.
Yes.
May
I
I?
think- Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
I was going to suggest that the goal that we start work directly with the community, with the diverse groups in the community to help the county council. Does that address it? Is that, or it's not, still not sufficient? Go ahead, Eva.
I think maybe we could incorporate this instead of just data-driven solutions. We could say data-driven and community-centric solutions.
Okay. I
How
like
about that?
Okay. I like that.
But Francisco, are you typing?
I'm handwriting. I'm not
Okay.
but if I'll try to put that in the chat.
I was just wondering, should we do this real time? Because I hear a lot of great ideas, you know, coming across, you know, what Arthur said and
Yeah.
John and
Yeah.
Eva. If there's a way that we could real time write out the goal collectively, or
Yeah,
what
'cause
do you
I
think?
wish I-
Melanie?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat.
Are you, because another good thing about that is we could potentially pass it tonight.
Exactly. It would be great if we can come to agreement on it tonight.
Mhm.
Or at least in principle, where we can then figure out.
So do you have it pulled up right now, Francisco?
I have it. I see it, but I'm not sure that I can change it.
Because I was thinking if Logan could get you to share your screen and then you could type it in real
Okay.
time.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah,
So
Francisco,
Logan,
you
I'm
should.
gonna let this go, and if you make Francisco a screen sharer, we can do it in real time, and we can potentially pass this tonight, barring edits. You know.
Yeah.
He should be able to share.
Okay, I'm not really sure that I've never shared. So let's see. How do we?
Were you an only child? What do you mean you never shared?
Yeah.
So there's a green button at the bottom that says share.
Share. Got it.
And if you click on it, you'll see an icon of the work plan that looks like a Word doc. And if you click on that,
documents.
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. I clicked on that.
You would
see
have to have the
application
work plan.
windows?
You would have to have the work plan open yourself. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. Hold on a second. I can. Okay. I'll close that. I don't need it.
And make sure that you don't have anything else weird open on your screen.
I am going to try to avoid that. Okay. Draft work plan. There we go. And this is the yearly report close. Okay.
I think Sean added something in the chat as well. If anybody's looking at it.
Okay. Let's see.
I mean, just to start the sentence, you could kind of play around with that.
Okay. Document 1. Trying to, excuse me. Don't say it. Okay. All right. Now I have it on my screen, but I'm not sure how to.
So at the bottom of your Zoom page, if you
Right.
move your cursor, do you see the green arrow that says share under it?
Yes.
Click on that,
Okay.
and then you see where it says
Oh, I see.
application.
Desktop. Okay. Hold
Yeah.
on a second. I see. Okay. I'm sorry. It's asking me to. My computer is asking me to do things here. Okay. Let me just close that. Okay. Share again. Sorry. Applications window, desktop. Security. Okay. Okay. Hold on a sec. Open systems. Security. General. Privacy.
You want me to try?
Um,
I'm happy to try.
sure. I'm sorry. I'm just
No, that's,
All right, Logan, you have to make Terry a sharer.
Yep, she's done.
I am.
okay.
All right. I might have been looking at the basketball game predictions, but I'm not doing that. So goal to help the county council, what do you want me to say?
Yeah,
And
it's
let me put tracking on, hold on.
to help the county council identify data-driven and community-centric solutions.
You want me to
That's
put tracking on or not? Track
Yes.
change? Okay.
Yeah.
To help the county council, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And identify data-driven and community-centric solutions.
Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Solutions.
Solutions is there.
Should there be a hyphen between community and centric?
Rather be in the
If there
sorry?
is one between data and driven, then yes.
Yeah. And should it be community centric or community centered?
So I said centered,
Oh.
but
Sorry,
I'm not gonna quibble.
centered.
Okay,
Okay, great.
that improve
Yep.
everything else?
I think everything else is fine unless there are other thoughts.
I want to ask a question, right, if you don't mind. You hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I like those two things, but I want to bring out something I noticed when we were doing in our subgroup with Ava and Francisco. There's another little area here when I was doing it that bothers me, and that is that the police department tend to not execute all the suggestions or the legal or legislation in the manner in which I think, or to give a good explanation how they are doing what they are directed to do. And how do we weave that into bringing that to the legislation attention?
Well,
the council.
you know, our strategy number 2 deals exactly with that. It talks about understanding how certain aspects of police reform are being implemented, including recommendations and findings of, and then you have the items. But then at the end, it says MCPD's efforts should exceed these requirements and recommendations, as well as meet the expectations and demands of Montgomery County's diverse communities. I don't know if that addresses your concern.
Can we change that to
yes.
must?
I'm sorry.
Could we change that to must rather than should? I guess we can't really control that. Like, we can't control in the practical sense what MCPD does. So I don't know if
Right.
it makes sense to say must.
That's right. But well, that's our expectation, I guess. And
Yeah. To me, I'm just going to not agree or disagree with it. I just want to say, to me, it's not so much we can control what they do as opposed to bring it to the attention of the council. That is how we have assessed that situation.
right, and that's what the
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I was just answering.
yeah,
No, I was just answering her question. I do agree with you. I mean, for now, I do. I didn't look at it from the standpoint that you indicated to me just now that it was being covered here. You know, I just have to see. We have to see what happened, but it's on that line. It's on that line of action in any case. So I think we can go with that now. But I just want to have that as part of how we assess what we're supposed to do or what we can do or should do, or whatever way people want to look at it. Okay.
So are we good with the objectives and the goal? Can we move on to the strategies?
I think so.
Great. I think we agreed that strategy number 1 is ongoing. 2 is now ongoing because we have a subcommittee working on it. So could we go to 3? Encourage MCPD to undertake a robust planning process incorporating the formulation of specific goals, objectives, strategies, performance measures, and outcomes for all significant program areas. Now, one of the things that Susan mentioned at our last meeting is that MCPD is in the process of formulating its own strategic plan. And I think, you know, that may be an opportunity to address this particular work plan strategy that was in last year's work plan. And if we do, I think, and we don't need, if we do decide to keep this one, this strategy, then I think we would probably need a subcommittee to follow up on it.
So this is what I was talking about, Francisco. So like right here, let's call it subcommittee, I don't know, C, you know, and that way we can have, oh, I didn't mean copyright. But you know, that way we could have a cross-reference subcommittee C and you look back at the objective, you know, that's where I was talking, you know,
Okay.
or here, this is compliance again too, correct? So
2 is compliance, yes.
yeah, something like that. So, that's why I was saying some of these may overlap some of the information, right? Encourage robust planning. So is there going to be a planning committee? You know, how do we want to parse that out in terms of workload?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. You know, for the work plan, we don't necessarily need to you know, cross-reference everything.
I don't know if I agree with that because there's a lot of committees, right? And there's going to be there's a lot of objectives. There are 10 objectives here. It goes back something that Arthur mentioned way back. You know, we want to make sure we don't eat, you know, try to bite off more than we can chew, right?
And understand, and just remember that number 1 is ongoing. In other words, that's what we do. Number 4, again, that's what we do, all of us. Number 6, that's what we do, but what we tend to do is when there's a new bill, we form a subcommittee for that.
So some of this, what I hear you saying, some of this is ongoing day-to-day work, and some of it is task-oriented work.
Exactly. So I would say strategies 1, 4, 6, and 10 are ongoing. And we don't need subcommittees for that. We will need a subcommittee probably when we're looking at a particular bill, but we can't decide that now.
So you said 1, 4, 6,
and 10.
1, 4, 6, and 10. You know, we do on a regular basis, and we don't need a separate subcommittee for those right now. I mean, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so, but that's I think anyway. I think what we first need to decide one is whether we want to take on strategy number 3, and if we do, then I think we need a subcommittee, and we can call it subcommittee, and we can decide that as well.
So I feel like number 3 would be subsumed into some of the others. I'm still in the camp that I don't know if we need it.
Okay.
But I will defer to the group.
Yeah.
Can I say something about that?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of bothers me about 3 is the first, to encourage MCPD. I don't know whether that's part of what we're supposed to do. Firstly, is I don't know. It kind of seems that we are taking some kind of authority over them without going through the council people.
Mm.
Can I ask a question here? You know how we've said we're preparing to send letters to other agencies, and when we say encourage, would it be similar to that with certain things in writing? Would that, and Logan probably can answer that best. I hear what Arthur's saying. Yeah, we kind of we're here to give council advisement to the county council, and to write something to the Montgomery County Police Department might fall outside of that, but we are taking liberties to send letters to other agencies. So would that fall under that?
I think to John's point, you might be able to capture this by rephrasing it as, advise council to encourage MCPD or something like that.
Yes, that's
okay. That's fine with me. I think that's so Terry.
So I have a question. If we're going to keep this, would this count as ongoing?
Well, again, I think this is whether we want to seek a role in the strategic plan that MCPD is trying to develop. And I think we would all want MCPD to do this specific thing, to come up with a strategic plan that that has these components. But if we don't think that that's necessary, I don't have. This is not a one that I feel very strongly about.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask a question? Are we assuming that they don't have a robust plan?
Well, we don't know, do we?
So exactly. So
and go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Francisco.
No, we don't know, and we know that they're formulating a strategic plan.
Okay.
No, but that's if they are, then I guess there's no action required for us. But if they're not, maybe that's one of the things, or maybe
it's something like assess, evaluate, and advise as appropriate to NCPD planning processes, something like that. because that's what we're supposed to do. I think what Arthur mentioned, we're a conduit, right? So we're gonna assess, evaluate, and provide feedback as needed.
This-
I think that makes sense to me. That's like, sounds good.
Our
Can I,
parameters.
can I add one thing in it? Not so much what you just said. I'm not changing anything what you just said. I just want to use the word robot. And I don't know if that's a good word, because it's a subjective word to me. What robots look from whoever, I don't know how I would assess whether they have a robust plan or not.
Okay.
I'm gonna say one other thing. And what I would say, whether is an effective plan as
Right.
opposed to
Yeah.
a robust plan.
Let's switch that. That's awkward.
Okay.
Particularly that we don't have any benchmarkings as to other police departments that do have a robust plan.
Mhm.
That makes sense. So, access, evaluate, and provide feedback on MCPD's planning processes.
Go ahead. On specific goals and objectives and strategies, something like that. We're going to look at the goals, objectives, and strategies for, the county council as well as for the community. And again, be that conduit.
Right. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Processes, planning processes on specific goals. And if I lose you guys in the screen or the whatever, because I didn't prepare for this, so sometimes you guys go away, but then I took my microphone off, so I'm sorry. Planning processes on specific goals. On delete. On specific goals, objectives, strategies, and performance measures. That's a lot to say.
Yeah,
and outcomes. I mean, can we just say goals, objectives, and outcomes?
Yes.
Specific goals, objectives, and outcomes.
For all significant program areas.
Okay. So this is ongoing, correct?
No, well, it's not ongoing. But
So, can I ask a question? So, would such a committee be like as needed or as informed? Like, we don't know where they are in their strategic process, right? But if next year they're rolling, that's when we would start a subcommittee, right?
Right. Well, yeah, and it may be that we don't have NCPD says, look, guys, we're doing this on our own, and then we don't and we don't want any of your views or opinions, and then we would have to wait until MCPD rolls out its strategic plan and then look at it.
I would say that they might have a plan. I was on the subcommittee for the budgeting, and I would say if you got a budget, you've got a plan.
Yeah.
Well, they are working on a strategic plan.
Touche, John.
Yeah. So it's the question is and you're right, Brian. I don't think we need a subcommittee just yet. Again, if we don't have, if we find out that there's no role whatsoever for us.
Well, wait a minute, Francisco. John has me thinking maybe we need a subcommittee to ascertain what the plan is. But no, I think we're good. You're right. Until we get something more concrete.
Okay, and then we can just leave it as that.
Yeah.
Can we move on? So I guess what I'd like to know is, does anyone object to keeping the number 3 as it now written? And can we move on to number 5?
So moved.
Great. Number 5, you know, we have established now a subcommittee to do this, this particular goal. So I think we should keep it, obviously.
Yeah.
The strategy, and that's not the compliance.
It's the data subcommittee.
It's the data subcommittee, which we can call subcommittee C, or the data subcommittee. I think that's great. The question is, does anyone want to change any of the wording as it now stands? And you know, this is, you know, the subcommittee will do its own work and will decide whether this is this is the guidance, right, that they will take on. But as they develop their work, they can decide to make changes, to broaden it, to narrow it as they see fit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so
we can sorry, we can revisit this during our committee throughout the year. Is that the plan, or before the draft is finalized?
well, you know, I think, you know, this is a guidance document, but if there's something that you think right now that needs to be changed, let's discuss it right now. We're doing well with the time, so.
Okay.
I have
Okay. The only
one-
thing that I would suggest, sorry, or suggest is the accountability aspect of it, right? Police to be accountable based on the data too, right? So, the collection of the reporting and management to ensure that transparency and accountability, and help the department with.
Yeah, you know,
The second sentence after advanced transparency, kind of, yeah.
you know, the
But it's
question.
something that we can debate, yeah, whether we
Yeah.
have the, that's why I asked whether we have the right for it, yeah.
And I would suggest, Terry, instead of an and, 2. Yeah,
Not
right
there,
there.
the second.
And accountability to help the department provide.
Can I ask you a question here, Francisco? Minute, right? Where you say to help, are we actually going to help them, or we're going to encourage them, or suggest, or I don't.
Well, we're not going. Yeah.
Yeah,
we may help. We may help NCPD as we ask questions, and maybe subcommittees meet separately, or we may help them directly, but in reality, that's our strategy, is to help. But obviously we can't do that. You know, the ones that have authority over NCPD are the council and the executive.
It's really to support the department in providing effective, responsive.
Right. Yes, I think that works for me. Does that work for you, Arthur?
Yes, fine. I like that, really, support.
Perfect. Support the department. Great.
12 years of college, not down the drain.
Yeah, okay. So are we good with this? And can we go on to number 7?
I'm good with it.
Great. Number 7, review and address MCPD's lack of benchmarking against comparable jurisdictions, which the department could use to help evaluate its performance on many of its important programs and activities. This is a leftover from the previous commission. I don't have.
It's not specific enough. I don't understand what that means.
Well, neither do I. I don't have the background. Maybe Sherry or Christine can provide us some feedback. I remember Susan mentioning at the last meeting that in fact they were using a county in Virginia as a benchmark. This is also, and I should mention this, this was not an item that was mentioned in the council's letter to us as one of their priorities. So I'm not really sure that we want to undertake this.
No.
And particularly as you know, we have plenty of other subcommittees working, and I'm really not sure that this is an issue that.
Well, isn't this part of number 1? I mean, proactively gathering data and insight from other sources of information. So if we're going to compare apples to apples,
Yeah.
I think that this is something that, you know, we can't compare ourselves to a small county in West Virginia, but I think they were talking about Falls Church, right? Or something that's very diverse like that, Arlington.
It was Fairfax County.
Fairfax, there you go. Yeah. But wouldn't that be something that could be incorporated in one?
Yeah, I agree.
I thought.
Well, frankly, I think we might as just get rid of it.
Yeah.
And because I'm not even sure that this is an issue. I don't know about you, Logan. Maybe you have some background on this.
Just that there was discussion in the previous iteration about, I mean, I don't disagree with Terry's suggestion that it's captured in number 1, but I think the previous commission talked more about specific peer jurisdictions to compare the data from MCPD to those jurisdictions.
Okay.
It's more of a specific area of focus for the last commission.
Okay.
So can we hear from Cherie then, since she was with that group? Maybe she can give us some insight. Is there something we're missing?
I'm sorry, I was driving. So just want to recap. The issue is I just walked back in the house. That's why the thing
No
cut
worries.
off. And
Are you on a device where you can see the screen?
But I missed a part of the conversation. That's really my point. So as I understand it, the issue is whether we should insert language about comparison with a peer jurisdiction. Is that the issue?
Well,
Whether we should take it out. It sounds like.
Because right
ahead,
now, Cherie, we have a strategy left over from our work plan from last year that that is focused on the lack of benchmarking against comparable jurisdictions. MCPD's lack of benchmarking against comparable jurisdictions.
Right. And so their response has always been something to the effect of, well, really, there are no comparable jurisdictions. And so, so I don't know, but so I think it is appropriate for us to say that they should, first of all, identify comparable jurisdictions, and in their benchmarking, in their activities, those comparable jurisdictions can be what they use as a way to determine how they rank up, right? So there are so that kind of is a two-part problem. Once identifying comparable jurisdictions, and secondly, assuring that those comparable jurisdictions are following best practices, because we don't know that.
So
Right.
Cherie, it sounds like maybe we can pull number 7 out. I do know that Fairfax County lately has been identified as a comparable jurisdiction. It's almost the same population. It's diverse, country and rural, etc. But it's again, it sounds like number 1 will cover us because we can fold potential benchmarking. And I'm also wondering, how does benchmarking? Well, I guess it makes. I don't know if it makes for better policing or what. So yeah, I'm with the group now that we can pull that out, Francisco.
Yeah, because I think the other part of it, Fairfax may be comparable in a number of its demographic factors. However, I don't know where they rank on following best practices as established by some other body, you know. Yeah. And that becomes, you know, because we don't want you to compare yourself with somebody who is not, you know, following best practices. That's not going to lead us to a good place.
Fair.
Does that make sense?
Right. Could we include in here what you said, Cherie, and say number 1, which includes the identification of like jurisdictions, benchmarking and data, something like that. And I think somebody else had their hand up. So I was just thinking at the end, just saying, which includes, it sounds like they never identified the benchmark, right? And then they never pulled it out. Was that Henry? You want to say something?
One of the best things that I would suggest to do is the FBI has the uniform crime reports, which benchmarks. All police departments have to report to them various different kind of crimes, and they benchmark all the police departments. So it may not be just Falls Church. It might be a police department in Idaho, which is diverse, or maybe in Minnesota, which is comparable to Rockville, Maryland. And I would suggest that even for us to liaise with the FBI so that person could help to give us the types of information that they request and see whether our own police department reports in a similar type of fashion.
Gary,
can I suggest
go
that
ahead.
we use what is the name of the group, Logan, that did the overview? Was it EJI or something like that? It was
4A, Effective Law Enforcement for All.
Yes.
ELE 4A, yeah.
So if I would suggest that maybe we reach out to them and ask them, you know, what are comparable jurisdictions that they know follow best practices.
Okay.
Because they might be able to come up and at that point our question, our foundation is not just us saying what's comparable or the police saying what's comparable. Right. It is, you know, some other this group that the county has paid to do some stuff that is very familiar with our police department. Does that make sense?
Very much so. Good.
Mm-hmm. Terry, right. Can you go back to number 1? So I have a question. I think can we yet let go of number 7? Because I feel, are we not covered under variety of sources and methods when it comes to benchmarking?
Right, number 1.
Okay.
So wouldn't that fold in benchmarking and any other kind of method we might need to meet the goal?
Do we want to be specific and say including benchmarking? That's a question for the team.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's fine so long as we all understand that. And you know, and we can make a note of that in the minutes to specifically say that we took number 7 out because we feel that it's already subsumed, it's already included in under number 1. Does that make sense? So that we, you know, so that it's it's not a decision that we're going to, that so that it is a conscious decision that we've made, a specific decision that we made, that it fits in under number one. And I don't necessarily think we need to do anything else at this time. But I think we do need to follow up on it sometime at some point.
Well, can we take a vote on it?
Sure.
Or a poll? So and help me with what exactly we're voting on. I'm assuming we're voting on whether or not we want to keep number 7
as a separate
as a separate item, or do we see number 7 subsumed in number 1 such that we would eliminate it? So we would either keep number 7 as a separate item, or we see it subsumed in number 1 and we would delete it. Is everyone clear on the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So raise your hands if you see number 7 as a separate item and you think we should keep it in the work plan. All right. Raise your hands if you think we should delete number 7 as you see it subsumed in number 1. All right. 1, 2. Raise your hands either physically, electronically. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I see 7. I don't know how you're voting, Kathy, but the motion carries with the majority. So we will take out number 7, Francisco.
Great.
And Terry for your notes.
Super.
Do we want to add any more language to number 1 on benchmarking, or do we want to leave it just as is? Will everyone lower your hands unless you would like to chime in? Or
I'm indifferent. I just noticed that we had to go back to Cherie to ask her what this was about. So, if we all hit Powerball, I think that, I know we have it in the minutes, but I do think just saying including benchmarking would be good in case everyone wins Powerball and never on a committee ever again, So just,
well, I would finish up my term even if I hit Powerball, but okay. All right, so that might be, so let's add and benchmarking, or what are we adding, Teresa?
which includes benchmarking, various sources, which includes benchmarking. That's all I wanted to say.
All right.
And
Is everyone in agreement?
Good.
I'm sorry, Chair Bellamy. Just for the record, because it's hard to count hands on the screen share. Could folks speak up or just put in the chat briefly if anybody was opposed to this majority vote, so I can record that? Otherwise, I'll have it unanimously in favor of subsuming number 7.
Well, no, some people could have abstained and not voted.
That's true. If there's any abstentions or nay votes, please just let me know or put in the chat. Thank you.
All right. So are we good? I think, Francisco, we can keep going.
Yeah. So number 8, review the role of police in the probable cause and pretrial release decisions of district court commissioners. Again, this was something left over from the previous commission. I received a comment, I think it was from Henry, that he was interested in this particular item. But I don't have more background on it than what we've gotten from the previous APC.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what 8 is. Can someone explain it to me? Just to kind of break it down, the role of I'm not sure I understand.
Someone do that, and then let's hear from Henry, and then Cherie.
Yeah. I'm happy to explain what this item is whenever y'all feel you want to hear about that.
Well, let's see. So Henry was going first, and then we'll hear from Cherie.
Yeah.
Thank you, too.
My interest in it was basically to find out what more that this commission could do for in those cases, which is like more of a attorney situation with the decisions of the court. What role do we have in disputing those types of decisions? It was pretty much more of an interest to find out the purpose for it, because actually I thought it could be eliminated.
All right. Okay. So Cherie, will you please enlighten us?
Yeah, so here's what happened. Okay. So I'm sorry, now I'm walking around my house. Just give you the lay of the land. So somebody gets picked up, right? And they get, you know, they get taken to a district court magistrate. Okay, here. That's the way it works. That magistrate, and I'm not sure if that's the right term right now because I'm a little, you know, been a long day, but that person then here's a presentation from the police about the charges that should be lodged against the person. That and that's the charging decision at that point, right? No one from the state's attorney's office is involved in that. No one from the person who is picked up does not at that point under Maryland law have a right to counsel. So this person now has officially entered the system. And based on that charging decision that was made. Oh, and by the way, there is absolutely no requirement that the district court, that the magistrate is a lawyer. Magistrate may not be a lawyer either. Okay, so what you have is the police are bringing somebody in and they're saying, yeah, you know, here's what happened. These are the charges I recommend. Okay. Now, I don't know how much back and forth there is. I don't know if it's just accepted. I'm assuming, I'm hoping it's not, but I don't know that. And the state's attorney has indicated that they are not involved in that. Okay. So anyway, Sean says they're called commissioners. I think that's right. I just cannot remember the exact term. I'm sorry. So now flowing from that decision comes a whole lot of other things, you know, like how much is your bail? Are you going to be held on your own recognizance? Are you going to be released on your own recognizance? So there are decisions that flow from that can have a really life altering effect on an individual. The reason that's important is because it's not until that's already done that the state's attorney then enters the picture and decides what charges to keep or dismiss or add or whatever. You know, there's up until this point, that's it. You know, and then the person has a bail hearing and they can challenge that determination and all that. That's okay. So when we found that out, the question was posed, okay, so this is an interaction totally between the police and these commissioners. That seems to be, and I don't think Montgomery County is alone in Maryland in doing it that way. I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think we're the only ones. And so the question was raised, okay, because this is an interaction between the commissioners and the police, then we need to understand what the police sort of process, policy, protocol, whatever you want to call it, that they implement that that gets them to that place, right? I mean, what are their what is the policies that they use to decide, okay, I'm going to charge this person with, you know, disturbing the peace, but I'm gonna charge this other person with an attempted assault because they could both be the same fact pattern. So, you know, it could be a bar fight, right? So that's where that's the reason it's there. So I hope that clears it up. If not, you know, you can ask me some questions. I may not be able to answer them, but that is my recollection of how we got to that, to asking that question.
Okay.
Terry, was there a review? Cherie, I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. We look alike.
Twins. Cherie, was there ever a review?
No, I think this is something that came up rather late. And so I don't think we ever got to that. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think we had, I want to say that we may have had the state's attorney in to talk about that. But quite frankly, it could have been, you know, he could have been explaining this to another group that I'm involved in. Okay. So yeah, I think it bears and more fleshing out, because I don't think we ever asked the MCPD about it. I remember hearing John McCarthy talk about it. I don't remember hearing MCPD talk about this process.
Okay.
So-
C. Brewer.
That's one of the reasons why I was interested in this, because it seemed to be so problematic. If the officer charges someone for a robbery, they have their own penal law, and he goes to indict that person at the district attorney's office. The assistant district attorney might say, that's not a robbery, it's a grand larceny. And charge him as, and drop the charges down along that way. You have to get into the penal law. What's the definition? And I didn't think we'd be looking at police reports to find out whether the officer articulated the right offense for us to get into that. That was my interest in it.
So
Wait, I'm sorry, Francisco. C. Brewer has their hand up. I don't know if that's on purpose.
yeah, well,
They put something in the chat.
yeah.
Okay.
And,
All right.
I was going to address that. So the strategy right now is, it's very open-ended. It's like review the role, and obviously we would need to get a lot of information. Both Officer Brewer and Officer Strata have suggested that MCPD would be willing to provide additional information on this particular issue. So as we can either keep it or remove it. If we keep it, it would be with the understanding that at some point we need to create a subcommittee to follow up on this, get the proper briefings from MCPD, the officer of the state attorney or whatever, and then come up with a recommendation to the committee.
Francisco, I want to say what puzzles me about this here and what I just heard from Sherry is that I think we need, it looks like to me, we need to do something even before we deal with what the police role of the police. We need to know, from how I see this, is what is the policies, what is the legislation, what is the law has to say, what the county law that is has to say, or that how this process should be done. And then we would sort of realize what the police role is. And then after that, we would then deal with what we're going to suggest, do about it, how we're going to approach the council people, whoever, to change it if that's the situation. So I think we need to find out policies and law
Mhm.
on
Well,
this position.
I think the subcommittee could decide on how to pursue that, the inquiry, but I defer to others.
All right, Cherie.
Yeah, let me just say that I think first of all, I can't really see this thing very well, but I think it's open-ended enough that Officer Brewer has indicated they would like to come and speak about this. I think we should leave it in here because if they come and speak to us about this, we have in fact reviewed it. Okay.
Yeah.
That is and based on what that information that we receive, based on the information we receive, we may want to decide to do more, form a subcommittee, ask some questions, have some more people, whatever. But I think it's currently open-ended enough so that we can that we will have fulfilled our commitment under this under this language. If the police come, they tell us what it is they're doing, what their policies and procedures are. I think that's sufficient for right now. I think the really bottom line for me anyway is to understand what the operational policies and protocols are. And then we may have we may have additional questions, but right now we don't even know what they are. That's okay. That's it. I don't want to keep talking.
That's helpful, Cherie. And Francisco, I think I see an exit to this one. So I do want to invite someone to offer a motion that we keep number 8, and that in the July meeting we invite Officer Brewer and any other relevant area experts to.
Pastor Bellamy, I think Officer Brewer had her hand up. I think.
All right.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Just in the interest of time, I just want to explain very, very shortly.
Wait.
There's a lot of misunderstanding.
Officer Brewer, I'm sorry, we can't.
You still might. Yeah, you still might.
Officer Brewer, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
I'll just put it.
It's feedback.
Okay, put it in the chat. We'll wait to hear from you. And in the meantime, we'll hear from Eva.
Yes, I think it would be great to hear what Officer Brewer has to say. That being said, remember what we talked about in our sort of work plan kickoff meeting, that making the most of commission quora time is important. So I do urge us to consider having, we don't even have to call it a subcommittee, we can call it an exploratory task force, receive this presentation and then do a quick report back to us. I think that could help optimize our time. Just something to consider.
This is true. So we did have the conversation. Last year we had a lot of presentations. And so, we learned a lot, but we weren't as productive potentially as we could have been. So we said this year we would kick any information to a subcommittee. And so getting information relevant to issue number 8, do we want to kick that to a subcommittee that will then report back to us at the July meeting? Or do we want to hear from Officer Brewer at the July meeting? What are your thoughts, Francisco?
I just second Ava's comment. I think, well, first of all, I think we should just keep it as it is. And then, this, and then we can decide after this, because I'm just looking at the time, it's 8:10. To form a subcommittee, I'd be happy to be in that subcommittee. I think Henry and Cherie and others may want to being that Sean, I see Sean raising his hand. So,
I would
and
just
Arthur,
say,
and of course,
see her response as you are noting that, because she is on most calls, Officer Brewer.
mhm.
She's saying she can basically give that explanation. So I don't even think that a subcommittee would be necessary if she could explain it during one of the meetings.
And I should mention that in addition to Officer Brewer's explanation of this process, it would also be helpful to have the state's attorneys people, explain the process as they see it too. I mean, this is sort of a, this is sort of a two-part hit.
Along with Mrs. Bronson, hello, this is Captain Estrada. Again, I'm sorry to intrude. I went ahead and I wrote Susan an email to invite somebody from the ASA's office to come and explain that policy and procedure. So just to let you know, that's been taken care of.
So this sounds like it's going to be a robust discussion, because I know that we're going to have questions, and so we can create a subcommittee, and it'll likely be most of the group because we're all interested, but at least we won't take a time from our monthly meeting. So it sounds like, Francisco, you earlier gave us a motion that we would pass number 8 and create a subcommittee that will then follow up to review the information.
Yep, I think that's.
I infer that.
Yeah,
all
I
right.
did.
Great. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. Can all in favor of keeping number 8, creating a subcommittee to review the information here soon and very soon? All in favor, say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Or any opposition, that might be the best way. So any nays? If so, say nay. Any abstentions? So Logan, that's unanimous.
Okay.
All right, back to you, Francisco.
Well, I think that basically completes our decisions on the work plan. We've modified a couple of the strategies. We subsumed strategy number 7 into 1, and I think we have a work plan that can be incorporated in the into the final report, into the annual report. What I would like is I would like to just go ahead and recommend that we approve the work plan and that it's included in the annual report. If Terry can send their revised work plan with the comments that we have made to Logan and Susan so that they can incorporate it into the annual report, I think that would be great.
All right, so just so that we've heard from the group, you've heard, we'll turn once again Francisco's words into a motion that we have completed our work plan with the edits that have been made tonight in the meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we got Henry for a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposition? Motion carried. This is great. We got so much done tonight. This is so great. This is so great. All right, any old business? Going once? Going twice? Moving forward. Any new business? Going once?
The next scheduled meeting?
It's the second Monday in July. That is so crazy that we're halfway through 2025.
The 14th of July, Monday, the 14th of July, Bastille Day.
Wow.
Alrighty. Thank you.
6:30 p.m. Be there or be square. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Sorry to be so litigious, but no one will ever say Chair Bellamy forced anyone to do anything. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 All opposed, stay online. All right. All right. Everyone, Francisco and Eva and all of you, thank you so much for your hard work. Thank you, everyone, for your input. Thank you, Logan, for your assistance. Everyone have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.